Hi there, I'm Birgit O'Connor and welcome to my studio. Now in this particular lesson we're going to be working on this wonderful parrot tulip. The original painting that I did years ago was actually a 30 by 40 and that takes up quite a bit of my table. So what I've done is scaled it down to a half sheet size paper, which is actually 15 by 22 inches. And the original painting, let's take a look at that, actually had a stem going right through the middle here. Now I loved that stem, but scaling it down to this size, I can't really put the flower on the bottom. So this can be problematic. The nice thing about it is that I'm able to retain a highlight, and I do like it, but to make it a better composition, I thought, how about if I just tuck it back and bring those petals out in front? So this is what you'll be doing. And what we're going to also do is a practice before you get started in the painting, so that way you can try to retain your highlight here, get the flow of water and color. And this is actually a 140-pound piece of cold press Winsor & Newton paper. You can do it on Arches paper, whatever you have. Basically, what we're trying to do is retain the highlight, get the color, have it flow without getting a ton of blossoms in there. So once you have your piece of paper, just make a simple oval-like shape and repeat it a couple times before you apply it into the painting. And then when it comes to choosing the colors, you're going to use whatever you have or refer to the material list. But if you don't have those particular colors, that's okay. Just use what is available to you. Basically, I don't like to make a real organized chart. I'm just playing with some water and color here, testing it, and then I'll leave a great big swatch so I can choose my shadow colors and layer right on top of it, and we'll have a better idea of how that works. So I think you're going to have a lot of fun, so let's go ahead and get started. I have a sheet of 140-pound Arches paper. I'm going to go ahead and, oh actually it's a Winsor & Newton, so we'll work with that. I'm going to fold it in half, fold it in half again. Then I'm going to start a small tear right there. Pinch the paper, make that like that. Hold the paper at an angle, apply pressure, and tear. What we need to work on is the amount of water, retaining a highlight, and getting that color to move and control over this. That really is the key of the entire painting. Okay, so here I'm going to go ahead with a pencil, put that in there so you can see. And I'm not putting the pencil drawing up here. I just want to fill this shape with water. So remember, we're just practicing right now. I'm going to take my water with my number 30 and not my Hake, and the reason why I'm not using the Hake is that this is not a huge shape. It's a big shape, but not huge, so I don't need this. I'll use my number 30, dip it in the rinse bucket, remove the extra water, and then come in, and a lot of times I do not bring the water up to the line because otherwise you can easily go over it. But if I have a nice point on it, I can, so maybe I'll go up to the line. We'll see. And if I try to be careful and go to the line, I'm going to go slower. So that's usually why I stay away from the line. Like there's the line, there's the brush, I leave a little gap. And then with the color, I'll come back in and go up to the line. So let's see if you can see the amount of water. There you go. And you can also see I've got a little dry space there, but I'm not going to worry about that. And thinking about the size shape that I have here, do I want to use a 20 or a 14? I'm going to use, let's see, if I put the 14 on here, I'm not going to apply that much water. If I use the 20, if I press too hard, I'll release too much color, so I need to be careful. And I think to get the color intensity, I'm going to go ahead and try it. I'll take the 20, dip it in my rinse bucket, remove the extra water, otherwise we'll have too much water in here. Trying to decide, do I want to remove this? Let's do that. Water, and then I'm going to, what I'm noticing, I don't want to take too much water back into my color here. I'll just take a little color out. like that. This is dulling down. I don't want it to dull down faster than I can work. So hopefully you can see how much water I have in my palette. I don't want that clump. That's why I'm using the Sable Synthetic Blend. And then I'm going to go bring that color, scoop it up, bring it right up to the edge. If it's too weak, then I need a bit more color, less water. Go along the edge. Now it can have water in the center. Let's go and bring it along the edge there. And I might not bring the reds down. I mean, I might not bring the yellow down here. I'm going to think about that for a second. I'm leaving a space, something like that. Let's look at the water. And now I've got a big puddle here. That can be a problem. So I could take that water, move it around, and then I'll take my quinacridone magenta and my permanent alizarin crimson or permanent rose, whatever color you decided you want to work with, and then I'm going to go along the bottom, along the pencil line, a little bit of color, just like that. And if I leave it with a number 14, just a little line, it's not going to look very interesting. So I need to maybe bring it up a little bit. I've got a big puddle of water. That's going to be a problem right there. And I'm going to have to move it around. So the water is going to move along that pencil line. Then I'll take my number 30, remove the extra water there, and try to eliminate some of that water that's on the surface. And for that dry spot, if you can see that little dry spot there, I'm going to go ahead, take my brush, dip it in my water, remove the extra water, and just barely touch it. Okay, I'm touching any of those little dry areas. I've got quite a bit of water right there. Now where I originally added the yellow, that's drying faster than I can work. So if needed, I can come back in, add a little bit more water, or I'm thinking, do I want to put my color there? So this is how you're going to problem solve anyway. As you get started, let's add a little more yellow. I don't really want the yellow. What I want is the water, but I'm taking advantage of that yellow. And I'll bring it into my red and maybe over here. So I'm basically working with that little curve that I want to do. Just practice this. Now this doesn't have to be perfect because this is not our painting, but we need to have an idea of how this is going to go before we apply it into our painting. All right, so let's take a look at that for a second. It's very similar to that. And then for this area, while the surface is still damp, I want to take, I could use a synthetic brush that would work really nicely, but if we don't have one of those, or we don't really need it, but that's a good one to use, I'm going to take my number 14 blend brush, remove the extra water over there, take that little bit of color that I just removed, so we don't have a big puddle on the surface. And then I'm going to try to create a sweep, because that way I'm going to direct the flow of my petal. Now, what happens is if I go like this and stop, maybe, let's do it a little more dramatically. If I go like here and stop, I'm going to have a little blob on the end. And go press and sweep. Now looking at the paper surface, we can see that some of that's really shiny and some of that's a little dull. And I want to try to get some of those little green lines in there. That would be nice. So using my number 8 blend brush, or if I want to have, I don't have a synthetic brush right here that I can see, but so let's use this. So using my number 8 blend brush, I'm going to go ahead, maybe take a green, or I can mix a green and maybe a little yellow. Let's go ahead and put that together to get a green, or a little permanent sap green. Now I'm taking too much time. That's got too much water in it. So I want it to be a little drier so I have control over it and it doesn't bloom as much. So what I'm going to do is I'm thinking I want the tapered edge up on top, and I'll just do a couple of those. Now with that feathering edge, that's not necessarily going to be what I want. So to avoid that, I'm going to go ahead and just do what we've done before, move that paper around, and I waited a little too long, so it's feathering. So I'm going to try this. Take my number 30 brush, remove the extra water, and soften those edges a little bit. If you notice, I'm softening and then removing the extra water. Soften and remove the extra water. So that's what I'd like you to practice on first. Do maybe 2 of them, whatever you can fit onto your paper there, because we're going to have 2 main shapes right here. You can also do another one right here. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be a rectangle, but what we want to practice on is the amount of water, getting the color in, moving it around, retaining that highlight and that stroke. So go ahead and practice that, and then we'll apply it into the flower.